Brothers and sisters, it is a great joy for me to be here on this evening in this Holy Mass in this church, seeing many people from family, friends, from the parishes I have served in before, but also especially because it is here together with your rector, Father Rafa Ojeda, who was my spiritual director for many years, who has helped me, guided me when I was in difficult times, when I was in very great times. He was always there as a very spiritual father to me. And also when a few years ago I started discovering the vocation within the vocation. Already being a priest, I was a priest of this diocese. It became clear to me that the Lord was asking of me to enter religious life, which is a more radical call even than the priesthood itself, because it is an abandoning of oneself, as I have done yesterday, professing my first vows in poverty, chastity, and obedience, and as we do in our religious family, also in Marian slavery, according to Saint Louis de Montfort. And it is in the whole period that I was discovering this vocation within the vocation, and that I was discerning, that I was on the way to know more surely if it was indeed what God was calling me to, that Father Rafa Ojeda was helping me, was giving me counsel, was really a great support. So in this moment, I really want to give my very, very heartfelt thanks for all those times that we have talked, for all the help, for all the prayers. In the Gospel of today, we meet St. Peter and his companions who encounter Christ in a special way. And in meditating on this Gospel, I was wondering, what would happen if St. Peter was a young adult in this our time? And I think there would have been a few moments in this Gospel that would have gone differently. Not necessarily for the better. Because St. Peter in the beginning he's cleaning the nets after a night of fishing without catching fish. And then Jesus comes and asks for a small favor, to use his boat so that he can be in a better position to teach all the people that had come. And I think St. Peter was okay with that. A small favor, that is fine, it doesn't disturb me too much. I can still do my thing, cleaning the nets, because I have other things to do still today, very, very important things. So yes, you can use my boat, as long as you give me my space, to clean the nets, to do my thing. So Jesus is teaching, and then he asks Peter, go out into the deep and cast out your nets. Well, Master, with all due respect, but I have many things I have many things planned for today, and I have a very important meeting, and I really have to sleep. I have to do many things. So it doesn't really fit into my schedule. It doesn't really go into, what I consider to be, what fits for me. But in fact, we see in the Gospel that St. Peter doesn't do that. He has a very passionate character. At times, maybe a bit too passionate. Several times in the Gospel, we see that his passion still needs some ordering. But he is very docile. So when the Lord asks him, go out into the deep and cast out your nets, he does object, because he says, as a real fisherman, we didn't catch anything all night. If we didn't catch anything during the night, we're going to catch even less now. So that's simple logic. But then Jesus says, do it. Do it. And he goes. He is docile. He has his passions that still need some ordering. He has a lot of things to do still in his soul, in his character. But he responds to this invitation. And maybe it is because he had heard some things about Christ already. Maybe it is because during the time that he was still cleaning the nets, that Jesus was teaching, he was hearing, he was listening to the things that Jesus was saying. And maybe he was starting to get very impressed by Jesus. Jesus invites him to go out into the deep. Put out into deep water. And there he casts out the nets, pretty much without any expectation, but simply because he says it. It seems that he has authority to some extent. So he casts his net, and then the miracle happens. And then I think a young adult of this time, when a miracle like that would happen, would think, oh, let's see for how much we can sell all of this. You know what we can do with all of that money? I can get my boat fixed a little bit better. I can maybe enhance my boat a little bit, and get this little extra thing that I've seen in the store. And so really to kind of immediately reference everything to what might fit within my schedule. St. Peter doesn't do that. When the miracle happens, he immediately recognizes that it is not just somebody who has some kind of authority that he is showing. No, this is someone who has authority, who is authority. He recognizes to some extent already the divinity of Christ. And what does he do? He goes on his knees. And he recognizes, he confesses that he is sinful, that he has disorders within himself. He confesses and he asks for mercy. He doesn't confess, he says, I am a sinful man, depart from me. But he doesn't say, judge me and send me to the deepest parts of hell because, no, he says, depart from me. I am not worthy. But recognizing the divinity. And then Jesus says, do not be afraid. Now, I think a young adult of our time, in situations like this, when the Lord is really going to speak to the heart and the soul about something that is so crucial and essential, that has meaning for the whole of our life, that a young adult of this time, maybe myself included, would need to hear these words, do not be afraid, at least 15 times every day. Because when in our time we start to lose grip on our schedule, on our way of doing things, on my thing, we, as we can say in very proper American, we freak out. But Jesus says, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men. And it is fascinating that in this account of St. Luke, it is not a question that Jesus poses. He does not ask, do you want to follow me in order to catch men? He simply states, you will be catching men. Because the calling has already happened in the intimacy of St. Peter's heart, because he was willing to go on his knees and confess his limits and his sinfulness, and at the same time be docile to the grace that Jesus wanted to give. They brought their boats to the shore, and then a very simple statement: they left everything and followed him. And it is that simple. though not easy. They left everything and followed him. And I am very sure that having discovered this vocation within the vocation for the religious life, having prepared myself for over a year in novitiate, it is very interesting as a priest to go into the novitiate, to be a beginner, being a priest at the same time. But it has been such a gracious, blessed school to grow deeper into this intimacy to which the Lord calls us. To go deeper into this radical abandonment to which the Lord calls many, also from the Netherlands, also from many other countries. And the Lord really does call many more than we know, than we think, than we see. And I think it is very, very important that we relearn over and over again to be like St. Peter. And to know that even though we have our things, we have our failures, we have our disorders, it is not as if we have to get everything lined up and fixed and prepared and then we can make a choice. No, because in the end it is not our choice. We have freedom, yes. But as Jesus says in the Gospel of St. John, it is not you who chose me, but I who chose you. If the Lord calls you, there is one thing necessary: generosity. Be generous with anything that Jesus asks. Real generosity. And why? Because he has been too generous to us already. He was so generous that he became obedient to death on the cross. He was so generous that he gave his life to the very full, to the very last drop of blood, even though it was not in any way necessary for our salvation. But he willed to go so far so as to convince us of his extreme and radical love. So I am sure that the Lord has a very beautiful and a very clear vocation for every person. And it is not as easy for everyone to find it. But we have to have very clear before our eyes that every single person has primarily the same vocation, which is the vocation to holiness. Every one of us is called by our very nature and by the active, willing love of God the Father to become holy. And then as a secondary vocation, we could say, there is the vocation that the Lord has in store for each one of us to enter into marriage, to share the love and be fruitful, to follow Christ in being a priest, to follow him in religious life, to become ever more like him, becoming poor, chaste, and obedient. And I can tell you, having one day ago professed these vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but already lived them in this whole year of the novitiate, it is what gives the greatest freedom. The greatest and most true freedom. Because if you do not have any positions anymore, you're not bound by them. If you profess chastity, you can give your very whole, including your body, to the Lord. And professing obedience means that I have given my free will to the Lord, to the church, to my superiors in my religious family. Meaning that I know I am doing the will of God in any moment simply when I'm following my superiors. Which doesn't mean that I turn off my own brain. I have received a brain to reason and to use it. But in all things and every day, I try to form it so that it is always giving itself in obedience. And it is what gives the greatest freedom. Because in many other vocations and ways of life, how beautiful they are. Now I'm very partial about the religious life, I know. But in many moments and circumstances, you might wonder, I have prayed about this, I have thought about this, I have asked my spiritual director about this, but is this really the will of God, what I'm doing? In the religious life, there is this immense freedom that I know I'm doing the will of God when I'm doing what I'm asked to do, that I'm doing what I've asked if I could. And then, in our religious family, we profess a fourth vow of Marian slavery, as I said. Which means that I want to be completely and entirely at her disposition and under her leading hand. And also to give all the merits and all the graces that I might receive for all the things that I do, to give it at the disposition of Our Lady, that she might do with it what is good. Now I really ask that as St. Peter is docile, falls at the feet of Jesus, and follows him with everything. He left everything and followed him. I want to say to many of you who might be still searching for vocation, do not be afraid. And when the Lord calls, be generous and go. Go. Because the Lord gives opportunities, but He gives the opportunities in very specific ways and moments. And it might be that if you are not docile in a certain moment, that after that it is much more difficult to find this vocation that the Lord has in store for you. So really open the hearts, because this generosity will be rewarded. Because He is generous to us, and if we respond in generosity to Him, He will be generous to us even more, and all the same. It is this logic of the exchange of love. So leaving everything and following Him is what our world also needs as testimony. It is for the sake of salvation of many more souls that it is really worth giving a life, giving your own life. So I ask for the grace from Our Lady, that she might help all of you who are searching for vocation, who are maybe hearing in your hearts this call already to follow Him, to be generous. And I ask the grace also from Our Lady, for everyone else, to pray much for vocations. Because the Church needs the religious, the Church needs the priests to continue administering the sacraments, to continue forming all of the people and the families in the faith. Especially in these are times when structurally and socially, so to say, there are very few opportunities to really grow in faith, in virtue. So I ask this grace from Our Lady at the intercession of St. Peter today, and also all the patron saints of all of us, and patron saint of the city Amsterdam, Saint Nicholas. Amen.